Guys.
Hey guys, this is Michelle.
And this is Mark. And another episode of This is Mark and Michelle. But this is what we're talking about tonight. We're going to continue to compare medical medium versus GAPS. Or if you want, GAPS versus medical medium.
Because we had a request.
We did. And people would like to know more about it.
So we were perusing this and looking at the list of no foods. And there's a lot of similarities between this.
Hey,
Hi,
Liz, how are you?
There's a lot of similarity in some of these no foods.
There is, and we will talk about that. There
are some foods to eat that are definitely no foods here.
One of our viewers on YouTube wanted to see more about the diets, the differences between the diets. So we thought we'd talk about that a little more so folks can get an idea. Now, a quick short story for those of you who aren't normal watchers. Michelle and I both started on GAPS back in 2013. And for those of you who don't know, GAPS is gut and psychology syndrome diet, and it's a high protein, high fat diet. Then after you get to a certain point, you can add back cooked vegetables and cooked fruit. Then much later on, you can add back fresh fruit and that type of stuff. So it also has fermented dairy in it as well. So we started that diet. It helped me quite a bit. However, Michelle did not have that same experience.
No, I got really sick halfway through. So like 2015, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I got really sick doing this diet.
Doing the GAPS. And so...
Oh, for the podcasters, we're holding up these two books.
Yeah.
So the GAPS book is GAPS Gut and Psychology Syndrome, Natural Treatment for Dyspraxia, Autism, ADD, Dyslexia, ADHD, Depression, Schizophrenia by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride.
Mm-hmm. It's a yellow book with a wooden signpost on the front.
We're writing our alt text.
Yes, we are.
And then we're showing the medical medium book with the lungs on the front.
Yep.
The one called Secrets Behind Chronic and Mystery Illness and How to Finally Heal.
Mm-hmm.
And this one has the chapter on autism and ADHD in here.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And a million other things. I don't
Yep.
know if you can see this. I don't know if you can see those words.
It talks about all those other illnesses. I guess those are illnesses. Yeah, it is. So she didn't get better at all. In fact, it made her worse.
Oh, I was so sick. I didn't sleep for a month.
Uh-huh.
And it gradually happened.
She had adrenal issues.
Yeah, but all of a sudden it just exploded.
Yeah, it did. And so she kept on the diet for another 2.5 years. I
made it so that I could eat and sort of be okay. So it wasn't completely GAPS, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you ate a little bit of...
I mostly ate chicken. And I couldn't eat potatoes.
No.
Things were just... If I had any piece of fruit, I would get hives.
Yeah.
And bananas made me break out.
Well, what's funny is if I had any fruit, I would have regressions. Now, we called them regressions, bad behaviors. But we since later found out that those weren't regressions. Not really. They were detox behaviors. Because I had that trouble when I was doing the heavy metal detox. Some behaviors would come out at times. And what we might call negative behaviors would come out. And so fruit was a good thing. But on the GAPS, I didn't know it. I mean, we tried juicing. Didn't work for us. On the GAPS. Didn't work for me. And I think it caused hives and stuff in you, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't remember what juicing did.
But
I think it was carrots mostly that we did.
Yeah, and that wasn't good for me.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it wasn't.
Right.
So, excuse me. But the gut and psychology syndrome diet, again, is a high-fat, high-protein diet with a little bit of fermented dairy and raw garlic, and you can add back cooked vegetables and fruits as you heal, and then later on raw fruits and vegetables as you heal. Now,
we were eating some cheese.
we
this
were
diet.
eating some cheese. We were on
We
the
were
gaps.
eating butter.
And butter, well, because those were fats. That's
Yeah.
okay. Now, compare that to the medical medium diet. All right. The medical medium diet is a raw fruit and raw veg diet. Meats, even of his approved meats are really a no because of the fats involved in them.
And metals.
And metals. And viruses.
And viruses.
Lends food for viruses, that kind of thing. So medical medium being raw fruit and raw veggies, and you could have cooked potatoes and other cooked veggies like butternut squash and other cooked veggies like cooked summer squash and green zucchinis, things like that. You can cook your veggies. You just don't get the same healing properties out of them as you do if you eat them raw.
Well, Mark had stopped healing on the GAPS diet.
Yep.
And we had no idea what to do next.
We didn't. And so we went on for another year and a half.
And I felt terrible. I just really, I had the neurological fatigue. I had a weight gain. I was not sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
I was a lot of pain, joint pain, frozen shoulder, jaw pain. I had a lot of issues, and I always thought that how I eat is going to affect my body. We've been doing diets since '95, I think.
Okay.
We went low carb back then. I was already having to quit eating pizza and fun things like that.
Yeah.
Because I was sick all the time. I had IBS. I had migraines.
Yep. Jaw pain, all the things you said.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I was exhausted and tired of being sick.
Right.
And I had exhausted all the doctors in the 2000s. I went to many doctors. And I finally gave up on doctors and started doing my own research, which finally led us to the GAPS diet, which helped Mark
tremendously.
He became more connected.
More connected to her, more
emotionally.
connected to the world. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was cool. But his communication still didn't line up with his intent.
Yeah. So, in other words, I wasn't able to communicate my emotions and the desires that were coming up in me so that other people could understand.
And he was often frustrated that what came out isn't what he meant.
Exactly. And so some friends of ours introduced us to the medical medium diet. And for you podcasters, I'm again holding up the book. But the medical medium diet, to compare and contrast, medical medium diet again is all raw fruit, raw veg with some cooked vegetables. And meats, if you have to have meat, he only recommends, 3 different kinds. Grass-fed beef.
Organic turkey.
Yeah, that's it. Organic turkey and
3 kinds of wild caught fish.
Exactly, which is haddock, halibut, and salmon. Because they don't have the mercury in them that most seafood does. And so if you have to still have meat, if you still are honoring your carnivore side, then those are okay. But the whole problem is the more fat you eat, the slower you heal. And his medical medium's whole premise is that our livers are so backed up with dead cells, with toxins, with dead drugs, making sure the world isn't going to fall on us. The cats are back there. And
with viruses, with
bacteria, with dead red blood cells. I may have said that already. But
with fat, did we say that?
Yeah, said that.
And
the cat's distracted.
Yeah, we're distracted.
But your liver is so backed up, and unfortunately, you inherit a lot of that backup from the mother, whatever she.
Well, and whatever metals the father has.
Yeah.
It can all be in that little sperm.
Yeah, and sperm carrying, metal carrying sperm. So with all of those things in mind, people get born sick. And so that being the case, we have to start healing from childhood on. And so many of us, like me, like Michelle, we just were sick from birth. Of course, I say just us. Now, medical medium says there's about 10% of the entire population on the planet that's healthy. Everybody else is sick. And I agree with that. I can see how that would be, and that may be
Babies are being born with backed up livers now because everyone's so sick.
Well, and that may be what happened to me, is my mom had just had picked up too much from the environment that made her sick, passed that down to me, and I was born with a propensity to be sick. And so vaccines came along, bad food, bad, drugs that didn't help me, just all backed up. I already had a backed up liver, I'm sure, and adding that to it just pushed me over the edge of autism.
Well, then let's talk about your sister who was conceived after your dad had
been exposed to Agent Orange
in Vietnam.
And so now she has all kinds of,
a lot of problems.
Yeah, she has a lot of health issues because of his exposure to Agent Orange.
So it's both sides, mom and dad.
Yeah, and so, you get, I think most people are born sick. The huge majority of the population is born sick.
Some of them are much more obvious than others.
Right.
And so in the case of autism, we have discovered through
studying
medical medium, I'm holding the book up again.
Right.
That there are 5 areas to heal. And we're going to say why GAPS didn't do it for Mark.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The GAPS diet being high protein and high fat, and containing fermented dairy. The high fat just continued to back up my liver.
Mm-hmm.
The high protein, I don't think that was so much of a problem.
Well, it's just that meat is fat. He says even if there's no fat on the meat, it's still fat.
Well, because there's fat between each cell.
Right.
And cells already contain fat. That's what their bilipid membranes are. Lipid is a fat. Mm-hmm. So, or a type of fat, I should say. So,
so even if you think you're eating lean chicken, you're eating a lot of fat.
And so that extra fat that I had on GAPS, and for those of you who have kids on GAPS, if they get worse, you can be pretty sure that's why. It's all the extra fat that they're getting is backing up their livers. Now, as he says, meat contains viruses and other heavy metals. The dairy contains viruses.
It also feeds viruses.
It feeds them. I should say feeds them. That's probably the best way because we already have the viruses. And so those things made me, while not sicker, maybe, definitely
sick,
didn't. Maybe it was a different sick.
We'll go with
that. The pandas, right? Because pandas is viral. Medical medium says pandas is viral. And I'll tell you what, I found scientific papers that lend strong evidence to him being right that pandas is viral. So, so between all of the high protein, high fat, and the dairy, I was getting
a lot of butter.
We were
butter and cream,
and I was getting a different sick.
Yeah.
But I also slowed down in recovery because again, I tried juicing, didn't work for me. I thought it didn't work for me. It may have continued, but I didn't. But I didn't think I could do juicing and the GAPS diet at the same time. So, as the medical medium says, all of that stuff adding to viral infections that I already had, streptococcus infections that I already had, that kind of stuff, the GAPS stopped helping me because for that first year and a half on GAPS, I was great. I lost weight. I felt great. But then after about the end of 2015, things started to change for me and I didn't feel great anymore. And in fact, my dystonia, which is severe muscle cramps caused by neurological damage, neurological damage is caused by viral neurotoxins. Now, I found that separate from medical medium.
Well, that and you had no glucose stores.
Right, none. And so when we came to medical medium, he said, no meat, no fat. That's just backing you up and making you sicker. And I didn't want to believe it at first, but I thought, you know what? I don't feel as good as I could. Maybe this will make me feel better. We spent 35 days on the 28-day cleanse because we're hardcore like that. And I saw major changes. I got rid of my heavy metals in that first 2.5 weeks. My muscles weren't tight like they had been. I couldn't sleep at times because my muscles got so tight.
Yeah,
I could
you would
never
wake up
actually.
with Charlie horses.
I would, and I'd never actually fall asleep in a lot of cases because my muscles were too tight to allow me to sleep. You had that.
I started
as well.
sleeping, by the way.
Well, exactly. So did I. Because he suggests having a lot of fruit before you go to bed because it'll help you sleep better.
Right.
And it does.
So we had to change our beliefs. I mean, we were firmly ensconced in the GAPS mentality.
Yeah, in the Gestalt, which is just a system of beliefs. And so, yeah, we firmly believe GAPS is going to do it for us.
You got to have protein, you got to have fat, you got to have blah, whatever.
Yeah, and all my ideas of science backed me up on that. But then when Medical Medium came along, and he can be kind of anti-science, so that annoys me. But reading more of his stuff and then finding scientific papers to corroborate what he said has helped a lot. And so I can put aside his anti or ascientific viewpoint and go with.
Even in this book, she has a chapter on why vegetarians can't heal.
Yes.
So I had read that and I was like, okay, I'm not going to be a vegetarian. So look what happened. I went vegan.
She's holding up the Medical Medium book now after holding up the GAPS book.
But I had to change my beliefs while I was changing my diet. I jumped right into it, even though I still had these beliefs that I needed protein and all that. But I kept just reading and listening to his stuff. And because I felt better in one day, that was really a lot of proof for me.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. I don't agree with a lot of stuff he says, or some of the stuff he says. I mean, however you want to word it. But his stuff gets results. His ideas get results. And that's what everyone wants. You can do all the tests about, does my kid have such and such metals? Does my kid have the MTHFR? That's fine. You can do all those tests, but you're wasting time. You could be healing instead of doing the tests.
You could be spending that money on supplements that you know are going to heal you.
Exactly. Instead of wasting time on those tests. Because Medical Medium, he says the MTHFR is not actually a genetic mutation. It just talks about how
the liver isn't functioning properly because it's busy doing too many other things.
Right.
So it's a liver processing issue.
As opposed to a genetic issue. And
anytime we see gene problems, it's because the liver is backed up.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what he says.
What AW says. Yeah. So
okay, so there are five.
Uh-huh.
There are 5 things that we have discovered have to be healed to be completely rid of autism. And so now I'm going to start with number 1, and Mark is going to say why GAPS didn't help this and why Medical Medium did help this. We're going to start with heavy metals.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, GAPS didn't help me with heavy metals because if you're continuing to eat meat, you're going to get heavy metals passed down from the meat you eat, because I'm sure they don't test for heavy metals in beef and pork and chicken and turkey and lamb and all that stuff. And they know about it in fish, but I have never heard anybody talk about it in the other meats that you eat. So
was there actually a chelator in the GAPS? Was there any kind of chelation?
Nope.
So that would be another reason why it didn't work.
Right. And cilantro is a known natural chelator, which is why you can't eat cilantro when you're doing the ACC or you're doing any other chelation protocol, because it competes or interferes with the chelation abilities of these other chemical compounds that you use in other protocols.
Okay, so that's heavy metals.
Right.
Number 2, damaged gut.
Damaged gut. Well, okay. That did help my gut.
GAPS did help my gut as well.
Right. And by extension, it helped my brain, but not as much as I hoped that it would.
Right.
Now, mind you, I was going through all these changes coming out of autism, the initial stages of it, but Medical Medium did far more in a much shorter time than GAPS did for my brain and my gut.
And GAPS ended up making me sicker. So
Mm-hmm.
now we're going to talk about strep.
Mm-hmm. Now, on GAPS, nobody talks about strep.
Right.
They talk about yeast.
Yeah.
All right. And I get that. But
just so you know, medical medium says yeast is actually in your court. It is fighting for you. If you have an overgrowth of yeast, you have an overgrowth of strep. The yeast fights off the strep. So if you're having a candida problem, you have an even bigger strep problem.
Yes.
You need to really focus on getting rid of the strep rather than focusing on the candida. As strep goes down, candida will go down.
Right.
Did I make that clear enough?
I think that's pretty clear. So so with strep, again, the GAPS diet doesn't address strep, but it does address yeast. But as we just said, medical medium says strep is really the problem, not the yeast, because the yeast is there killing off the strep.
Okay. 4, viruses and neurological damage. Those are 2 and 1.
The GAPS diet does not address that. It does not address viruses.
In fact, it makes you sicker because what you are eating feeds the viruses.
That is medical medium's viewpoint, and I can see how that makes sense now. What folks may not know is that human DNA contains the DNA of viruses, retroviruses. An example of a retrovirus would be HIV. Now, that's not to scare anybody. That DNA is inactive. It just doesn't. It wouldn't produce the virus. But our own DNA contains that. So I don't eat hardly any meat anymore at all. In fact, I don't think I've had meat in a week, which is saying something for me.
High five that!
Because
wow.
It's just caused me too many problems, you know. And I've cut down on the fat dramatically because I still have a little bit, like cashew cheese or
olives.
Olives, or a little bit of olive oil on a potato, you know. But aside from that, after my problem with it last week, eating too much coconut oil while frying some potatoes, I don't want to go through that problem anymore because I don't feel good and it causes problems between us. So why do that? Now, GAPS diet does not address fat, except to say eat more of it.
Right.
So,
but especially it does not even talk about viruses.
Right.
And we have learned that is a huge aspect of autism.
Pandas and pans, if you have those, they are viral. Medical medium is right, but I only say that because I found science that shows that he's right. So if you treat for viruses, if you have pans and pandas, it will.
We think stimming might be a neurological damage from viruses.
Right. And while it calmed me, it wasn't something that I could control that well.
Well, what calmed you?
Rocking back and forth.
Oh, okay. So while the stimming calmed you.
Yeah, while it did, I couldn't control the stimming. It could be really difficult for me to not rock.
It might not be that the stimming was caused by the virus, but the stimming was used to help you feel better about neurological damage.
Because of neurological damage.
Yes.
Right.
Did I say that? That makes sense?
I think it makes sense.
Okay, so we're going to do the final one. We started with damaged gut, strep, heavy metals, and virus. All of this is due to number 5.
Number 5, medical medium. Now, a backed up, poorly functioning liver is not talked about that I know of in the GAPS book, in the GAPS diet. And now, I know a lot of people say, well, you need liver support. Yes, you do. If you're on the GAPS, you're going to need liver support because if your liver doesn't function well already, being on the GAPS is going to make it function even more poorly. That's okay. I think that's my view. That's medical medium's view. There is a thing called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which means if your diet is high in fat, your liver is going to back up with fat over a long period of time while doing its job, and then it won't process glucose anymore. And that being the case, it's just going to back up with fat. It's going to stop processing glucose for your adrenal stores and that kind of thing. And it's just going to continually process fat, making it poorly functioning for your body.
Right.
Now, GAPS didn't address liver. Medical medium does. He says eat as little fat to no fat as possible.
And then there are specific foods that he suggests to eat to make your liver happier.
Apples,
radishes,
spinaches, salads,
great leafy greens.
Yeah, and
apples,
because
you said apples.
Apples.
Okay.
Because his liver rescue book is full what is it? It's like a 3, 6, and a 9-day protocol where you eat huge amounts of greens, apples, and spinach. They're greens. And then
I haven't looked at it for a while, and I haven't actually done it because it's pretty intense from what I understand.
Right. And so since that's the case,
but you can do it slowly with just fruits and vegetables.
But the whole point we mentioned the liver, now that we're 25 minutes in, is the liver to him is the whole thing. You clear up, you heal that liver, everything else will work properly. Because when the liver gets backed up and the toxins start overflowing, they get stored in other areas of your body, mainly fat. If you podcasters couldn't hear that, that was me slapping my tummy. All right. So it has gotten smaller because I have reduced my fat intake to almost nothing. That's been one of the toughest things I've ever had to do in my life.
It was really hard to stop eating fat.
Mm-hmm.
Especially having come from the GAPS, which was all fat.
Exactly.
And a note, fat can't be processed in the liver without adrenaline.
Mm-hmm.
So that feeling you get after you eat something that's fatty,
mm-hmm.
that's adrenaline, and it's making you feel extra good.
It's a good feeling.
It becomes addictive.
It does.
So fat is addictive.
Mm-hmm. Which is why it's difficult to break that.
Yes.
So anyway, that is our comparisons between the two, a little more in depth.
Yes.
And anything else you want to say?
Heavy metal detox smoothie.
Celery juice, lemon water. Download our book at www.healyourautism.com. It is entitled Buried Alive, One Man's Journey out of Autism.
And we can do a one-on-one consultation with you if you want to get started, if you need help, if you're stuck. And we also have group coaching.
Yes. And we will be putting up more about that later. All right, guys. See you tomorrow night.
Have a good night.